Prior to that, I served in a church restart in the Diocese of Fort Worth. And prior to that, I was at one of the largest of parishes, St. Michael and All Angels in Dallas, Texas. So my experience has ranged from the Episcopal version of megachurch to the smallest of churches to kind of the average parish experience.
Yeah, good. Pardon me. So the first surprise of this workshop is that this is not about post-pandemic evangelism. We set that title in July when things were looking good. And
then Delta.
And so this is mid-pandemic evangelism and beyond. How about that? We're just going to name that truth, and we'll just go forward, right, in the ever-evolving way of things. So what you're going to hear today is probably not going to be terribly surprising to anybody. We're providing one angle on this. You probably have lots of other angles that you've thought about and considered when it comes to what evangelism means to you in your congregations, in your worship settings. And so don't worry if it's not anything new. We're just asking for time to kind of think intentionally about it all together. And particularly because it was our presiding bishop, right, who said that we are now in a church that people select into versus select out of. For a long time, the church was something that people selected out of. Everybody did church. It was rare for people to opt out. Now, people are opting in at a much less rapid rate. And so we're conscious of that, and that part of our role is understanding that that's something we need to make, we need to give them a reason to opt in. And so that's part of the exploration we'll do today. So, back to you.
So in this kind of environment, we find ourselves in our parishes holding quite a bit of anxiety, I would think. How many of you have a parish who's grappling with your financial future right now? How many have staffing questions? How will we staff our parish? How many of us are in parishes where we have seen precipitous drops in attendance, especially through this pandemic? And how many of us has that created some level of anxiety for us as we look into the future for our parishes? So what we're talking about is trying to put that anxiety down. We're not going to give you the magic answer to answer those questions. I know if you were expecting that.
You can go if you have to. It's okay.
We're sorry to disappoint. But hopefully we can have a conversation about how we invite the Spirit into the life that is happening in our parishes today, and in paying attention to where the Spirit is moving, ultimately find answers to some of those anxieties that we might be carrying around right now.
And so the anxieties are real, and we acknowledge those. And what we'll ask you to do for the next 65 minutes or so is to just, as a mentor once taught me, we can keep them, but we're just going to box them up for a minute and just shelve them, just for a little while. Because if we don't, if we're sitting in that anxiety, we're all being driven kind of from our fear brain, right? We need to get up here where we can be creative and thoughtful. And so we can keep the anxieties. We're just going to set them aside for the moment. You can come back and get them anytime you want. But for the moment, we really want to be up here and in that creative space where we can think more broadly. So we invite you to just take that breath and allow yourself to, you want answers and you want to think about all these hard things, but just give yourself room also to enjoy the time and the conversation so that we can be in it together. Okay? Yes? All right.
So I think if we can shelve those, put that box aside, the first thing for us to do is to kind of get our heads around this rather scary word, evangelism. So maybe what we'd like to invite you to do is gather in groups of 5, and we'd ask that you not be in just a cohort of fellow disciples from one parish or mission, that we have a diverse grouping of people. So take a few minutes, grab 5 friends sitting next to you, and what we want to do is have a 5-minute conversation about what is evangelism to you in your context in this age. So what is evangelism to you in your context in this age? Find 5 friendly-looking strangers and chat about that.
Feel free to get up, walk around. If you're sitting alone, everybody's going to be sweet to you. What does evangelism mean to you?
But this is still a good crowd for a workshop. So let's take 1 to 2 minutes, just kind of wrap up where you are in your conversation. I am going to walk around for this.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Because I be able to hear them if I'm not.
Fair.
Okay, so what were some of the notions of evangelism that came up in your small groups? What does evangelism mean to you?
Hunter's going to walk around
There's a
so
whole
that
lot of
he can
clergy in
repeat
here, and
things.
I know clergy are not that shy.
Well, we were discussing how, and a couple of us at least are cradle Episcopalians, and we were discussing how it's really in just doing what you have been taught, showing people what you've done, what you're doing, and if they're interested in that, if they find a piece from that, then they'll come on in. Unfortunately, we're talking about the parable of the one who sows and then God harvests. And the problem with that is sometimes you never know a lot of times you never know what happens to that seed because you've moved on someplace else.
So evangelism is doing what you've been taught, showing people with your lives what you have received from God, and remembering the parable of the sower who is out there scattering seed, but may not ever know the fruits born from where that seed has landed. Is that a fair summary? All right, other ideas of evangelism. Let me get back there so I can hear you, so I can repeat you. In a nutshell, it's reaching out to strangers. Other responses, other ideas of evangelism. Yes?
Giving people a sense of belonging.
Giving people a sense of belonging. Sharing relationship with God.
I was going to say sharing your story and inviting them to share their story.
Sharing your story and inviting them to share their story. Oh, ditto.
Let me jump in too and just say, I wouldn't know where the camera is to look, but if you're watching on the live stream and you have a contribution to make to the conversation, please put it in the chat and we can have somebody read that out too. So if you're watching on the live stream, hello, and we're grateful you're here, and feel free to engage that way, and we'll get a flag from our folks in the booth.
So the other thing is that maybe the elephant that's in the room that nobody has named are the ways that we've experienced negative forms of evangelism. So quick anecdote. When I went to university, I'll take this off since I'm not roaming around anymore. On the first day of new student orientation, they have all the student fairs, and I walk into the student union, and right at the front was a church organization who shall remain nameless. And before I could barely get inside the door, I had a clipboard put in front of me asking me to sign up to get something or what have you and give them all my information. And it was a little off-putting because it wasn't even with, hi, my name is such and such and I'm with such and such. But just, here's a clipboard, sign up. And I was like, I'm good, thanks. And then I meandered around and found the Episcopalians. So we've all had negative forms of evangelism that leave a sour taste in our mouth and that we don't really feel feel good about this. And that's not what we're talking about. Evangelism, rooted in the Spirit, is found in the practices of hospitality and welcome, which is what I was hearing from what you were sharing. That we do effective evangelism first by welcoming, by creating a welcoming space for people to find that belonging, to share their story, to hear the stories of others. If it is rooted in something else, if we're doing evangelism only to get another warm body in the pew that hopefully in not too long a time becomes one more pledging unit for the church, aren't we just focused more on our worship of mammon than we are of God? Aren't we focused on the wrong thing if our concern is just boiled down to parish finance? If we're doing evangelism in a way that is just throwing a clipboard in front of people, and it's not rooted in hospitality and welcome and that radical love of God, it's called coercion. And that's not what we're trying to be about. We're trying to welcome people in such a way that they feel invited to share their stories, wherever it is that they are on their journey with or toward God. So, what we have to know is, what are we welcoming people to?
Yeah, so the question becomes, what are we welcoming them to? And that leads us to our next kind of conversation that you'll have in your small groups. For those who are just coming in, sit nearish people so that you can be part of the chats that we're having in small groups. So what we want you to do in your small group time for this next portion is to think about the faith community context that you're in, parish, campus ministry, mission, otherwise, and think about how do you personally feel your parish, your community embodies God's love. Just one or two things that you can think of that you feel like, if you self-assess your community that you're in, how do you feel like your community embodies God's love that's most noticeable to you? And potentially most noticeable to the world, but what gets you excited about how you're embodying God's love in your community? So this obviously could lead into lots of long storytellings and stuff, and we have a limited amount of time today. So we'd urge you to just try and condense it. So if I'm commenting, I might say, Resurrection Gilbert embodies God's love by their really warm newcomer welcome, and their ecumenical ministry to welcome homeless women into our campus. Those are two things that I think are really great ways that we embody God's love at Resurrection. So, chat in your groups and talk about, for you, how is your community embodying God's love? What's exciting to you about that? Okay?
Let's take, say, another 6 minutes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Chat.
Are you doing the gifts of the congregation bit?
Just take 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll come around again. Okay. We want to hear about it. How are you embodying God's love? Give me somebody raise your hand. Tell me. I'm ready. Nobody is. Great, you are. How do you feel like you're embodying God's love at Church of the Epiphany?
Well, the ideas that came from our whole group are a couple of the churches are supporting the refugees and immigration.
Supporting refugees and immigration, awesome, very timely right now, yeah.
And making sure services during the pandemic are available on YouTube or Facebook or whatever.
Right.
That reaches more than the people in the parish.
Yeah, making sure live streams available and all the online.
Strong outreach activities of these parishes.
Yeah, the outreach, always fabulous. Other ways that we're embodying God's love. Yes?
At St. Raphael's in Benson, we have a grief and loss group.
A grief and loss group in Benson. It's beautiful.
Meets weekly, and we've had a handful of people who aren't going to the church now, and we've had a couple of stories.
That's been a source of evangelism then sort of for you, that you've provided love through the grief support group for folks that aren't even members. That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to keep walking around because I believe that there's more embodying of God's love in the diocese than that. There we go.
The outreach for homeless veterans to help support organization in the community that helps homeless veterans.
Community outreach for homeless veterans. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And tell me your parish.
Kingman.
Kingman. Wonderful. Oh, yes. Thanks. More? Yes.
We have programs where we feed the needy school children.
Yeah, feeding school children.
Constantly going to Sam's Club and buying food for kids who, once school is over for the weekend, they really don't get much food.
Yeah, making sure kids are fed over the weekend. Beautiful. Beautiful ministry. Love it. More examples. Way back there. Yes. I'm coming. You? Yes? Oh, yeah, okay. You looked around. Yes?
Iglesias, San Pablo, and
Yeah.
Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And saying that largely
Yeah.
to call home their spiritual home, worship style that's familiar to them, and encouraging families and lots of little kids normally.
Yeah.
So it's a place to try to encourage people to come and be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, maybe work into the fabric of other things.
Sure.
That's not the first thing.
So Iglesia San Pablo providing kind of a home respite place for a lot of people who are undocumented, and a safe place where they feel connected and warm, and it's beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, well, let's continue.
My microphone is turned off, so people on YouTube didn't hear anything I just said. That there are many, many ways that our faith communities are embodying God's love. And those ways come out of the giftedness of our parishes, of our missions, of the ministries at college and university campuses. And they show up in such a myriad of ways that it would be impossible for us to name them all. But it is a way for us to begin unearthing what the gifts of the Spirit in our faith community are, and how they're being manifested through an intentional walk with God. The gifts that we have from the Spirit are the ways that we begin to fulfill the mission of the church. And believe it or not, all of us in here have the same mission. Pop quiz, anybody know the mission statement of the church just right off the top of your head and where you could find it? It's not a website.
The bishop can't raise her hand. No, sorry, can't be the bishop.
Brother Hedges.
Amen.
Yes,
Where
that
would you
is
find
right.
that? Yay!
In the prayer book. If you want a page number, it's page 855. And to repeat it for everyone, including those in the interwebs, the mission of the church is to restore all people to unity with God and each other in Christ. And we carry this out through every single member of the church. Probably most importantly, through the lay members of the church. That is where the church is able to reach out into our neighborhoods and to invite people into these warm, welcoming spaces of practicing disciples. And that kind of is how we begin this process that we might call strategic visioning or strategic planning. And so, we have to kind of begin with where we are today and how do we see God's love overflowing the boundaries of our faith communities. So I'm curious. This is my part, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
What is a successful church? What's it look like? Just popcorn off, and I'll put my mask on and walk around so I can
If you yell, we can
hear you.
What's a successful church?
What's a
What does it look
successful
like?
church look like? What would you expect to find in a successful church? Inclusion, joy, fellowship, participation. Could I say engagement? Intergenerational. Strong children's program. Transformational. Making a difference in the community outside the church facility. So making change in those gathered, those disciples who gather in that faith community. Is that right? Yeah, so being a transformative space for those people. How many of us, any more? More. Yeah. Looks like Jesus. Curious. What about, like, we want a really strong adult formation program. It has to have good preaching. It's got to have
Good music.
Good music program. It's got to have the best children's program in the whole church. It's got to have people who give so generously that the church doesn't know what to do with all the money being given. It's got people who are there every single day and groups using all of its facilities all of the time. I mean, how many times do we find all of this in one church?
I heard it. Somebody said never. Yeah. Good answer.
Yeah. Never. That is why I think we think that you begin with where you are gifted and where those gifts are the invitation of the Spirit to dwell in God's love and to share it generously.
Because it's easy to fall into a sense of, even, we had a lot of descriptive words, but really, for a lot of us, it comes down to those, if we don't have these programs, we're not going to succeed. We're not going to be good. We're not getting the 4-letter word grow, right? We're all so concerned with grow, grow, grow. And if we don't, so we have to acknowledge that we have a place that we stand that is meaningful and powerful and has brought a community together for a purpose. And instead of kind of we should be that, we should be more like that, we should be doing this, all the shoulds that hold us back, what happens if we really stand in the place we are and look and love the ministry that we're doing without any of the shoulds? And then, yes, start from that place to see who it is God is calling you to be next for the community that you're in. So if you have a senior population, revel in that senior population. That's wonderful. They want ministry. They do ministry. You're not only successful if you have a children's ministry as well. There's more to it. See, and all of the examples that you could think of, right? All the shoulds that are over there that you can pull, but to really center in on who you are and what it means.
So in all of this, we are sharing these gifts. We're trying to do it in a strategic way. And we're trying to get away from the notion that our community of faith, our one parish mission or student ministry, etc., is going to have all of that. But it also is tracking what we have, paying attention to those things that we can track and measure, because that helps us to know where people are engaging with our parish communities. It's where we're able to suss out, are we the hand, or are we the foot, or are we the eye, or the ear? What part of the body is it that we are offering out to the world? And that is where kind of identifying it, naming it for ourselves, and then paying attention to where people are voting with their feet by showing up, and then putting energy there. Because where people are showing up is where the Spirit is active and moving and inviting others to come into our midst.
That grief support group is such a fine example, right? That's something that you're living into, inviting more of the community into. You don't have to be a member of your church to be a part of it, but they are learning something about your church, right? Because they're engaged in that one ministry, that maybe that might be a safe place for them, that maybe there's a place that they could belong at a church. And for many in this day and age, that feels rare. So to live into that's your offering to the community, is this unique opportunity to evangelize via love, via that hospitality and welcome.
Or like the group over here who said that they're doing school lunches for children. They noticed a need in the community and then began to respond to the need. Our parish, one of our most vibrant ministries, is a partnership that we have with one of our local elementary schools. And we asked the principal, how could we be an asset for you? And the principal said, our teachers and staff really need to feel some love. So that's what we're doing. We write thank you cards to the teachers every single month and restock their classrooms mid-year because they've got all the supplies they need at the beginning of the year, but they go through them in a single semester of classes. So looking outwards and paying attention to those needs and figuring out how is it that your faith community might be able to step into that space, to fill that gap that is in your neighborhoods as a way of doing evangelism. And no, when we go to the school, we're not going with our clipboards. But we do, write them a note on and says, I'm from Church of the Epiphany. They know who our people are, but we don't go in saying, so when are you going to join? Instead, it's just about being present and showing God's love in the way that we partner with our community.
And that community connection is a great starting place if you're not sure what passion exists in your community. If you're at a place where people aren't really voting with their feet, maybe there's just some general malaise about who you are and what you're doing, looking at the community around you and what the needs are in this place and time makes you relevant too. You're serving the population that matters, and people don't want church just for the sake of church anymore. They want to know what we're about, and in showing that love and that warmth in the way that is meaningful to people, serving in the way that is needed, they have an experience of us that's new.
So some of this is getting into kind of a visioning process and what that might look like for your church. And on your handout, Erika provided a table that kind of guides us through how do we get to this place where we are effectively equipping our ministries for doing this kind of work. And that very top line is kind of the one we want to highlight. And this is really your handout, so you know it better than I do.
And it's from the Alban Institute, which is noted there, but anytime you're exploring where do we go next, you're striving toward change. And for actual change to occur, all of these elements need to be in place. There needs to be a vision. What is the preferred outcome? What is the preferred future that we're striving for? You have to know that you have the skills in the community, in the congregation, to undertake this transformation. So who has the skills to do it? You need incentives. What will motivate people? People need motivation. So what will motivate them to get engaged, involved in things? You also need resources. Do you have the people power that you need to make the vision come to light? Do you have a place? Do you have the tangibles? Do you have the intangibles? Making sure that you're resourced to do it. And then you need an action plan as well. You've got to know how you're going to get there and what that path looks like. Without any of those elements, you can see further down the chart what it will lead to. If you don't have a vision, there's just confusion. What are we doing? Where are we going? If you don't have the skills, then there's just anxiety. How are we going to make this happen? And so on. So knowing that these are all the components you need to kind of take that thing that you think your community is about, to develop it further, and to make sure you've got these puzzle pieces in place with your leadership team particularly, so that you can build towards something that becomes another source of evangelism for you, or a broader sense of evangelism for you.
And, a lot of this begins with the first step of listening. So you may be sitting there thinking, well, that's great, but if it starts with a vision, it's been 15 years since our parish did a visioning process, or perhaps if your parish just went through transition, maybe you're thinking, well, we just did that because we just hired a new priest. And I would say, no, you did the work to call a new clergy person. The work of visioning mission for your parish is different from that, and begins with listening, and listening to the Spirit, listening to where you are seeing those gifts manifest themselves, and listening to the community around you to identify how it is that your parish can step out in faith and to invite people into relationship. We're always beginning with relationship. And that we're letting go of this notion that my faith community has to be all things to all people. We are all coming from different faith communities in this room. And every single one of those faith communities has a different set of gifts that the Spirit has gifted to it. And so what we're encouraging you to do is to look at where you are gifted and to lean into that giftedness as part of your visioning, as a part of the way that you step out in faith. I'd also would say that a visioning process is, if you're thinking that you need to come up with a 5-year plan, don't. The world is way too fluid for a 5-year strategic plan to be meaningful. Instead, think about ways that you could do strategic visioning on an 18-month or 12-month cycle. That your strategic visioning is happening every single year as part of your practice of ministry. And this does not preclude having a vision statement. But it does mean that the vision for your parish needs to be so big that you know you cannot achieve it without God's help. And then begin coming down from that vision into ministries and tasks and to-do lists and all of that really gritty work that comes with doing ministry in a community.
And to, in the midst of that process, there's that anxiety in the box on the shelf, right? And a lot of those fears revolve around death. If we choose to say yes to this ministry, it might mean that we need to say no to this other ministry. And I think naming that, opening that up so that we can grieve and know that anything we lay down makes it possible for someone else to pick it up and do that piece of ministry for the kingdom. But we've been called to this piece of ministry, and we're going to do it damn well because this is what we've been given to do. And to trust that the things we lay down to make room for that will be picked up by others in other places at other times, and to just rest in that expansiveness of how big God is. It's not all up to us. It's not all up to you personally or your parish personally to do everything. So you can breathe again and just say, this is our ministry. And to really give yourself permission to lean fully into what you're called to versus doing a lot of things so-so
So something to help you in your handout is what's called a 90-day microstrategy. And this is a way of kind of thinking about what is the next step for your faith community to begin living into an evangelism informed by the gifts of your parish or of your mission or campus ministry, whatever ministry it is that brought you into this room. And so we begin first with kind of knowing what our missional vision is. And that's where we get to those core values of our parish, that we might want to list. We talked about a lot of those being transformational, joyful, curious, hospitable and welcoming. All of those kinds of words would fit in that middle circle. And then we want to identify what the outcome or the mission is of that ministry. So for, that may be, we hope to feed 150 children every week at our local elementary school. That could be the outcome you're hoping for. And then from that outcome, you go to the left-hand side of the page and then identify what are the gifts present in your faith community right now that you could put down that help you get to that outcome. And after you've listed all of those gifts, and don't forget your facilities, your chairs, your tables, your people, your finances, all of those things that will help you to achieve that missional outcome. Ask, is this enough? Do we have everything we need in order to achieve this missional outcome? And if you don't, identify those things in the bottom left-hand corner that you need to add to the recipe. What ingredients are you missing? And then you might need to also ask, and what are our untested assumptions or pitfalls that we just haven't tested yet? We don't know if this is something that people will respond to. And then you get to the task list. List all of the things you're going to do in order to get to that missional outcome. And after doing all of that, look at your strategy and ask, do you think that through these gifts that we have, the gifts that we're going to bring in, and all of the things that we've said we're going to do we feel that it will achieve that missional outcome? And it's a 90-day strategy. It's meant that you are really focused. So if your missional outcome is as big as the mission statement of the church in the prayer book, you might want to bring it down a little bit.
But if you have a 90-day strategy to unite all people to, just then please let us know.
We'd love to know what that looks
we'd be
like.
with you.
So that then you execute on your strategy, and after 90 days, if you haven't achieved it, that's okay. That's okay. It just means you've just learned, we were missing this piece of the puzzle, so we're going to keep striving for it. You've learned something new, and it's a short period of time that you are working towards a very specific outcome within your ministry. And these can be really helpful when you are thinking about a much larger mission. This can be a tool to help you break that into bite-sized pieces that actually feel achievable. Because after all, you eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Amen. Yeah, so it really is, it's an opportunity to not get overwhelmed by the enormity of the task, right? To just bring it down to, if we have a goal, what can we do in the next 90 days to achieve the goal? And then keep moving forward. Assess again at 90 days, what else needs to happen? Where else are we going? To give yourself that opportunity to keep growing and building on it instead of this long-term goal that's so far out there, we may not see it achieved in our lifetime. We all like that little shot in the arm, right? Where you're like, all right, we're getting there, we're moving forward. So to allow yourself that room to do that. We also, on the backside of your handout, wanted to just offer a few potential methods for you in terms of discernment and understanding who your parish is, who your faith community is, some ways of really understanding what are the gifts of this community, and to do those in a broader way, in a potential variety of ways. So the Congregational Vitality Assessment is a free tool put out by the Episcopal Church Foundation. Kind of helps you understand how healthy is our parish, how sustainable as a community are we. There's a process of asset mapping, looking at your parish and saying, what are the assets of this whole place? And it's literally everything from your physical plant all the way to the people, to the associations you have with other communities and other organizations, really acknowledging what are the assets available to us that we can put in place or that we can acknowledge now, and how will those lead us into our future. You can do parish listening sessions. Hear from your people. Do not make decisions in isolation, right? Being in that somewhat vulnerable listening place where everybody is doing input, it will get you to the outcome with kind of courage and lots of deep listening. Even if you're hearing lots of disparate things, certain things will rise to the surface and you'll find your way with trust.
Think about listening also just as a practice for your vestry. What if your vestry or your leaders committed to doing if every member of your leadership team did a 30-minute one-on-one meeting with a parishioner every single month, one 30-minute meeting a month with people in the parish. That's 13 one-on-one conversations happening in the life of your parish. That's active, ongoing listening, in addition to like large-scale listening sessions. That can help you to know what is feeding your parish right now. Where is it that people are finding the joys of the Spirit in your faith community?
You can engage consultants or coaches or people who work a short time with a parish or a vestry that can help you kind of disseminate all your thoughts into an action plan. And then there's also this Renewal Works program. You know a little more about that.
Yeah, so Renewal Works, it's a ministry of forward movement, day by day, or forward movement. And it is a program for building out a vision for your faith community. Contrary to like hiring a full-time consultant, which could cost you about $10,000 for a strategic consultant to help you build a visioning plan, Renewal Works is $500 and is built on having lay people engaged in the process from start to finish and focused on spiritual growth and renewal. So it's a really great resource, and they've been doing it for a while now. So they've got a pretty decent track record of helping parishes, missions, and faith communities to really listen for those gifts of the Spirit in a way that helps us to grow in faith and to share that faith with those around us.
Yeah. So ultimately, this is all a matter of trusting God who has grounded your community that you're in love, in the gospel, and trusting that rootedness that will allow you to be who you are given to be, without the shoulds and without the what ifs, but to really be rooted in who you've been given to be, so that is who you can offer to the world. That's what you can evangelize about, is that thing. And when we evangelize about who we really are meant to be, there are others who want that same life too. And so it's an opportunity for you to welcome those who are meant to be part of the ministries you're doing. So.
And I think the last few minutes we have together, we wanted to leave for questions. What questions do you have? What What is it that has bubbled up in your heart as we've been together this afternoon?
We did so well, they have no questions.
Man.
They are all set. There we go. Well, we're grateful to be with you, and we'll be around a little bit too if you want to have more one-on-one conversation. But thank you, and bless your ministries that you have and your process of learning more about where you're going next in this mid-pandemic, hopefully someday post-pandemic world. Blessings.